Right, yeah, so to start with, I guess the Internet of Things, what is it? From a concept perspective, it's about connecting microcomputers to the Internet to allow for kind of automation of certain tasks or some sort of efficiencies of tasks. Organisations are using it for a number of different reasons. There's sorts of options that you can look to implement it for things like energy efficiency. So you'll probably have heard about smart metering. So a lot of energy companies are using that as a technique to kind of monitor people's usage from the internet in essence, and also for the consumer to be able to do that sort of thing. It's kind of now becoming or bleeding kind of into the business world. Predominantly, it's kind of a consumer activity where consumers will use it to do things. I guess the things of the Internet of Things is things like systems that can allow you to monitor your home, so turning on things within your home automation in essence, adjusting your thermostats in your home. There's also other methods which are, I guess, more business orientated, less consumer orientated, which are like monitoring people's heart rates for medical purposes. Also, cars are now implementing systems where they can monitor cars' performances and things like that within those sorts of systems. And also things like CCTV systems, as well as door access systems, so systems to access doors, PIN codes, access systems. And so those sorts of devices, as I say, have traditionally kind of been consumer-led. So we, as an organisation, have done some research. Our Spider Labs team have done some research into these systems, more on the consumer side of things. So we've bought kind of common consumer-based devices. We've had children's toys where they are internet connected. Also things like home automation systems where you can automate things like these door entry systems. And during our research, what we've really identified or found as an organisation is that they're not looking at the security aspects. So we're finding some very common kind of issues related to what we see also in the business world around just not doing good due diligence in the beginning of developing these systems. So more concerned about ease of use, nice looking UIs, I guess, but not really thinking about the security aspects of things. So that includes things like unauthenticated access to things like web UIs for these systems, so web user interfaces, so people can manage the systems to turn on their lights, turn off their lights. And of course, from an attacker's perspective, that's interesting to them because of course they find it interesting to be able to do things like compromise these systems to enable them to turn on light switches, to monitor people's home systems. And then of course the bigger picture is that there's been examples of where we've seen IP connected cameras that are on the internet. They're easy for people to go and monitor and watch those systems using things like weak passwords, again common in businesses we've seen as well. And of course small businesses are also in some cases using these kind of cheap technologies but as an easy way into monitoring, let's say, their environments from a CCTV standpoint. So that kind of weak authentication is a common thing we've seen across the systems. Also unauthenticated control of those devices through other methods, UPnP, as well as a method of managing those systems, so updating firmware, but again doing it unauthenticated. So just general kind of security bad practice is not being implemented on those systems. Also other things we've seen in the same kind of light is the ability for access to APIs, so systems where they're calling home to a web service, and that also is not being well thought out. As well as in some cases we've seen when they're setting the systems up, it's using unencrypted communications, which means that you can eavesdrop on things like wireless passwords, username accounts, and again kind of the inner workings of these internet connected systems. So I guess the thing that we've seen is that there's a lot of commonality between business issues we're seeing as well as with these internet connected devices, just general bad practice not being implemented across those systems. So from a remediation standpoint, there's a number of things you can do. I guess the initial thing is due diligence on those devices, make sure you're using the most up-to-date encryption methods for connecting them to your wireless systems, using Bluetooth pins where possible and using a strong pin, also not having your Bluetooth devices or your internet connected devices discoverable at any one time. There's also the concept of removing things like weak passwords, which again organisations and businesses are seeing as well that they need to look to do a better job of. From a more of a business standpoint versus the consumers, businesses need to be making sure they're doing their due diligence and risk assessment on these internet connected devices if they're going to use them, so understand the risks of implementing these systems and weigh up the benefits. I mean, we've heard of Android-enabled ovens. I mean, what do you need an Android-enabled oven for? I don't know. Maybe you want to turn on your oven when you get home, potentially. But from a business standpoint, is that really beneficial to have a system like that? So I think there's I guess, a business decision that needs to be made, and weighing off the risks of having these devices and the security implications of that. And if they have to, mandatory to use those systems to do the right level of due diligence, risk assessments, of course, scanning those and penetration testing those systems on a regular basis is also going to help those systems, and to make sure that they're secure and they're not going to introduce your organisation to vulnerabilities. So I guess they're the major kind of findings we found with the internet connected devices and kind of remedial actions.